I'm Chris Farrell, and this is On Watch. Welcome to On Watch, everybody, the Judicial Watch podcast, where we go behind the headlines to cover news and information the old legacy media really does not want you to know about. We try to recover some lost history and explain the inexplicable. When it comes to the inexplicable, today we're going to talk about the FBI, and to help us out, we have Kyle Seraphin. And Kyle, of course, is a former FBI special agent and a whistleblower at the FBI, a guy who had the guts to do the right thing when a lot of other cowards kept their heads down in order to collect their retirement paychecks. Kyle, welcome to On Watch.
Chris, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Hey, for folks that don't know, and I have a sneaking suspicion that about 90% of the Judicial Watch audience knows exactly who you are, but for the folks who don't know, give us like a 30-second little resume. So who's Kyle, and what did you do, and how do you get where we are today?
Sure. I think critical to it is that I'm an American citizen first. I'm a husband and a father. Those are all the most important things about me. And then I was a military veteran. I was in the Air Force for just under 4 years, did a one enlistment hitch. And then I was an FBI agent. I did 6 years in that. And mixed in there, I was a restaurant manager. I worked in corporate finance. I sold ergonomic office furniture right out of college and a couple of other things. So I had kind of a whole life and career of sales and management stuff and finance before I actually entered government service and did the military and then eventually the FBI deal. I worked in Washington, D.C. for about 5 years, 2 of which I was doing counterintelligence. 3 of it, I was doing a specialty surveillance program, which was really like the doghouse for most people. But it's the most fun you can have in the FBI. You're sitting in a car, you're peeing in a bottle, you're talking on a radio and looking at bad guys. So I got to go do that for a couple of years. And then during the BLM chaos, I wanted out. I went to Las Cruces, New Mexico. And then people know my name because I famously or infamously got an email saying the FBI was going to be targeting parents at school board meetings, which indicated to me that the Attorney General lied. So I brought that to Congress, found myself kicked out, and then I also exposed they were going after quote-unquote radical traditionalist Catholics, which was novel to me as a Catholic for most of my life. And so I've been kind of a thorn in the side or a mosquito at the barbecue for the FBI leadership since then, and my journey has been kind of strange since then. I run a podcast now for a living. You and I share something, and it's perversely unique. But in my misspent youth, I was a commander of the Army's surveillance team, both in Europe and here in the United States. So we did physical, technical, and aerial surveillance for counterintelligence purposes, but also in support of human operations. And the detachment that I commanded in Europe actually used to be targeting the Soviets. Mm-hmm. And then later on, I came back to Fort Meade and worked for something called the Foreign Counterintelligence Activity, and I commanded the Army surveillance team there. So that was a long, long time ago. But that has a different name now, and they have a very similar kind of sketchy mission, and I'm well familiar with it, absolutely. So anyway, that was a long time ago, but when you talk about sitting in cars and doing the adrenaline junkie thing of 0 to 60 and long hours spent, staring at something, waiting for activity. I get it. I'll tell your audience too, for their kind of awareness, because a lot of people can't really fathom what that would be like. It's like hunting deer or anything else hunting. You're just sitting, and then the thing happens, and you got to go into action. Right. And I think that actually is familiar to people. So people who enjoy sitting in a tree stand or hanging out or stalking an animal for a long time of just monotony and swamp and branches hitting you in the face, and then the exciting thing happens. Right. That's the lure of it. It's that kick. So for the audience. That is exactly right. Hunting our fellow human beings. Yeah. That's right. Hey, listen, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. Today, of course, we have the raid on John Bolton's house. I'm not really sure which way that blows, frankly. Part of me thinks publicity stunt and vendetta. There's other people I would much rather raid than Bolton. Let me get your read on that kind of off the top. What's your take on this effort to go after Bolton's home in leafy Chevy Chase, Maryland? Yeah, you see that looks like I've seen a lot of those houses. I've spent a lot of time outside of those houses on white collar cases. So that's how that plays. Right. My instinct is that it's entirely political. I think it's very theatrical. And I honestly think a lot of this stuff can be tied back to the failed rollout of the Epstein files and the way this went down. The FBI and the DOJ have been chasing a PR hope. And my sources over at DOJ were saying the same thing. They were like, just God bless, give us anything that we can do to detract from this sort of like just PR nightmare. And so I think this has been a self-inflicted wound. But here, let me give you kind of the broad strokes that I see. we just saw the director of the FBI, who I'm very critical of right now, and who I cheerleaded early on, much to the interesting sort of like side change. He just said no one is above the law. The FBI agents are out there on mission, and they're going after John Bolton and his mustache, both of which had a search warrant served against them.
The mustache has its own zip code.
That's correct. But what you saw, that no one is above the law, is the exact same thing that I saw Democrats touting when they went after Donald Trump.
Right.
And so, and obviously Bolton's a much smaller figure, but he's not friendly, and he's not very complimentary of our current president. So the same way that Democrats were cheering on the raid at Mar-a-Lago in August of 2022, here we are about 3 years from that moment, where we have a deputy director, or a deputy director and an FBI director cheering on that same sort of what I'll call weaponized political theater. This case existed for a long time. The Biden administration thought it was too political to pursue John Bolton, who was the former national security advisor for Trump. And they were like, yeah, we're not going to touch that. They were okay with going after Trump, by the way. So it's not like they really cared about politics that much.
Right. And just for context, Bolton, the issue you're talking about is Bolton got in trouble because he didn't do a pre-publication review of his book. He just went straight to press. And there were claims that he'd used classified information in his book. So that was sort of the contentious issue under Biden. And then they said, nah, we're not going to worry about it. And they walked away. Not that that hasn't been done before.
No, and look, they did the same thing to Biden, right? So they did the same thing to Biden. This is all this sort of like trotting out classified documents is the biggest thing. Like, has any national security interest been compromised? Can you tie anything dangerous to it? You know, is this looks like petty grievances on my end. That's what it looks like to me. You know, nobody briefed me on the case or anything. But
I just wish that, I mean, if you're going to sort of prioritize level of effort against criminality, I think Comey's a much more, legitimate raid target than Bolton. I mean, Bolton's kind of third string. Who cares? Comey
he's certainly not impactful. You know, the other thing is that
linchpin.
I haven't heard, Chris. I haven't heard anyone talk about Chris Wray.
Yeah, there you go. There's another one. There's
Like,
a guy who
you know, a lot of the Comey statute of limitations would be gone. So
yeah. So this is an interesting thing that we're seeing because on the political right, there's this sort of fracturing and kind of grouping of who's with or who's against various people, and folks that were friendly aren't friendly anymore, and other folks that, you know, used to support this or that. So it's a very curious time in Washington, D.C. to see elements of the right kind of fracturing and splintering. Like you, I knew Kash Patel when Kash was just Kash, right? So we're not great friends, but I know him enough to say, hey, how's it going? And I initially thought, okay, this will be a fun pick. This will be interesting to see what happens. And in my opinion, in my estimation, he and Bongino both were immediately captured by the organization. They fell for like the oldest trick in the book, which is to repeatedly run to them with emergencies and tell them how important they are and how much they're needed. And rather than actually cleaning house, they got sucked up into the game. Is that your take?
yeah, it's a classic intel ploy. It's overwhelm you, cortisol stress and overload, and everything is an emergency. Look, in the surveillance game, I used to get this as well. So I worked out of the Washington field office. We were the default national team. There was a previous national surveillance team. Then they got rid of it. So then it became us. And now there's a national surveillance team again. So everything old is new.
Right.
And so we would get a call at least once a month, sometimes twice a month. We had two teams, and regularly one of them was on the road. So other field offices that didn't have a team or they didn't have enough to cover shifts would fly us out. And it was always the same pitch, Chris. It's like, this is the big one. You know, it's like, they hit, like, I always play this thing. I got a clip from Ghostbusters I play on my podcast. It's Janine from Ghostbusters. We got one. Yeah, they bang the thing and the bell rings and everyone comes down sliding down the pole and it's time to go. I got calls, in the middle of the night. We got to have you on a plane first thing in the morning. Right. It's like, okay. And when you've done that 20 times, sometime in the 5th or 6th or the 8th time that they pull you away from your family on a Sunday afternoon and make you leave your mom who's in town visiting the kids, when you fly off on that and it's nobody and they never arrest the guy, because we had legit terrorist subjects that were never arrested, doing scary stuff.
A lot of them.
Most of them. I mean, the default position is not. And so whenever that happens and you find out that the quote unquote like white supremacist that's going to kill a whole police station of cops is actually a guy who meets with the undercovers, and you're listening in on the body wire, and the kid's like, nah, I think I want to like get a girlfriend and hold hands with somebody and like just go do that somewhere and go home and get a job. It's just never the thing. But if you have never seen it, they got played into it right away. We saw Bongino saying it right on Fox right away that there's, a million level 10 things on his desk. And, well, who put them on your desk? And you're the deputy director. Did you ask for those things?
Right.
Like, who's running your briefings? Do you know who those people are or why they're there or what their history is? No. He's talking about being in meetings all day long. Maybe that's the job, but like, deputy directors should call the meetings. They don't get called to meetings.
They get to set the precedent or set the priority.
So they were getting run by the agency. I think Kash is a different story. So I have a lot more sympathy for what Dan Bongino is dealing with for the audience awareness. He was never going to be successful because he didn't know the FBI. And you can imagine walking into any organization you've been in, if they told you to turn the screws and you didn't know who got there and when and how they got there and who they were aligned with and what investigations they managed to get rid of or who they got fired because that person made an allegation against them. How on earth would you go through and cut through that without knowing the culture and the history and having the sort of the institutional knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, there's a great post yesterday by a guy that you and I chatted about briefly before going on air here, and that's a guy named William Taylor, who I interviewed, a week, 10 days ago. Mm-hmm. And Bill Taylor, also an FBI whistleblower, he did a post on X in the last day, I think, where he laid out, this is all inside baseball stuff, but it's FBI procedure for opening cases and coding of cases that gives you the justification to do what you want to do. And that's a level of detail that to me is very interesting. I love that kind of stuff because it unlocks the code. It gives you the whole explanation as to how and why. But if you're just walking in off the street and think that you're going to be able to solve that and know what to do and how to do it and who's in charge, you're delusional.
100%. Like I said, I think Kash's story was very different. He immediately went in and started hanging out with the hostage rescue team. He got a locker, almost like getting a locker in a private club. He gets to keep his weapons out at Quantico now, and he's wearing the cool guy clothes, and he's got his own kit, and they put him in the helicopter. All of that stuff that's called bubble wrapping, where we make you feel really cool. You're part of the cool guy club. Like, oh, you didn't play football in high school? That's okay. Come here and be on our NFL team, and we're going to give you like a uniform, and you get to be the water boy. So they did that to him. I have friends inside the Hoover building that refer to him as the Make-A-Wish director because of all the things that he's run around and done. Kash Patel is wearing an FBI agent's badge, having never graduated Quantico. So all of that is that's like LARPing.
That to me was just,
it's just silly.
On the belt, right? Looking cool.
Yeah, and he went on Joe Rogan and like tucked in like when you're first an agent, you want to make sure everyone sees your badge because you're real proud of it. And 5 months of training and the selection process is long and all that stuff. So you're tucking in your shirt so that they can see your badge, when you walk places. And it's just all of that is embarrassing if you're a grown up. He's 40-something years old. He's like 46, 48 years old. Like, give me a break, dude. So all that's kind of funny. But I will tell people they need to go listen to the interview you did with Bill Taylor because it's fantastic. I listened to it a couple days ago sitting on a bike, and I don't listen to many podcasts anymore. I'm riding a bicycle listening to a man who I've never met, who I've never crossed paths with, who I follow on X, but not because I know anything about him. And everything he said was true, honest, and all the same problems that you would see.
Exactly.
The only danger, I think, for folks is that the inside baseball is too much for them to grasp. So if we zoom out just 1 second, let me tell people why they don't get it. Everybody thinks the FBI is this law enforcement agency. And in reality, at least 60% of what it does is intelligence agency operations. And many of the cases, probably more than half, are exactly what Bill Taylor was talking about. They're a 266 domestic terrorism investigation, which doesn't require a criminal predicate. What that means to regular people is you don't have to have committed a crime to have an FBI full investigation that picks up your emails, that picks up all of the bank activity that you got involved in, that involves an entire surveillance team following you around 24/7. No crime alleged.
It's predicated on I don't like you.
On threats, and threats are nebulous. It's threats or whatever you get to describe it.
Yeah.
And so when people understand that, they start going like, oh, wait a minute. That sounds like a secret police. You could just say that somebody's a threat and then use all your law enforcement. And then, by the way, if they find a crime, they can arrest you because they have badges and guns.
Right.
Seb Gorka actually called them a secret police to me based on that description alone. And he's exactly right.
Well, here's the other deal, and this as well as anybody, is that if I interview you for more than an hour, I'm going to get you on 18 U.S.C. 1001. You made a false official statement. Because one time you used the word of, and the next time you used the word from. And so that may sound like semantic BS, but if I'm in the mood to go after you and I'm going to just drill down, I'm going to get you on false official statement one way or another. And then you're left with an option. You're either going to cooperate with me or I'm going to arrest you. Pick. right?
It sounds
and
like you've seen
that's
this
the
playbook
technique
before.
that is done over and over and over and over again, right? I mean, how many times do you have to see or hear this?
Yeah, it's sad. And you know what's crazy is the people who are actually running the FBI right now participated in the movie that I helped behind the scenes. I was a technical director for Dinesh D'Souza on the movie Police State. So I got to work with Bongino. I worked with Dinesh. I helped script pretty much all the dialogue of FBI people in that movie. So if people from the FBI watch it, it'll look like a real FBI office.
Right.
They do things that you're like, oh, that's strangely real, you know? And it's really convincing. And Nick Searcy was in it, and he asked me stuff, and he's got, you know, experience playing law enforcement previously, and he's been around that, studied the roles, but there's real specifics to the FBI. So I gave him to him, and he comes off as a real creepy, eerie sort of ASAC, SAC type character. And he does a really compelling job because he got the real terminology and
the real deal.
You know, all of that stuff is very realistic. And, you know, the possibility of having your door kicked in on a Sunday morning was what we were concerned about. But the fact of the matter is the FBI is not specifically going after conservatives. They have recently, and I think that was really important that Bill said that in your interview with him. It's not about conservatives. It's about where's the funding, where's the budget, where are the priorities laid out. And then it's a bunch of people that are otherwise decent just doing what they're told. They decided to follow priorities instead of doing what Bill did, which is throw the flag and go, hey, that's not a hate crime. You know, that's a street fight. What are we doing?
You've talked about the passion or the desire, the need for the FBI to come up with white supremacy cases. Just this fixation for them. They're looking for the domestic violent extremist. They're looking for Elohim City, right? They're looking for this compound of whacked out Nazi, neo-Nazi, white supremacists. And you've said that, hey, look, you know, you've outstripped the sourcing. You're looking above and beyond what even actually exists for real out there.
Yeah, it's the old problem of like supply and demand, where the demand for it outstrips the actual supply. You know, we worked a bunch of white supremacy cases when I was in the surveillance unit. They would task us because they fall into the domestic terrorism guys. So theoretically, it's a real bad guy. And so like my average DC area white supremacist was like a bum loser living on his mom's couch and, you know, in Manassas, Virginia, or it'd be like a quote unquote white supremacist who's like a 21-year-old like tweeting racist stuff, or he's on Reddit on some sort of, you know, mean discussion board and he's saying not nice things. He's wearing khakis and we're watching him at Starbucks in a polo shirt and khakis, like getting a latte. And you're like, this is really it? Like, this is what we got? You know, I remember doing a case we did down in North Carolina where we followed this guy, and he was supposedly going to go shoot up a police station with black cops in it. And he was a Marine. He was an active duty Marine. And he kept following the rules of the Marine Corps. And so rather than just put like him on base restriction and say you can't go anywhere, they put an FBI surveillance team on him 24/7 for like 3 months.
That's
and you
very
know what that
expensive.
cost?
Very
Super expensive.
Yep.
People moved into hotels down there. They basically made a permanent team sit there. They had NCIS involved in it because it was on the Marine base.
Stick a plane up in the air to fly donuts.
We'll fly around and have somebody cut circles in the sky for 4 hours to do nothing, and then do another one later. And at the end of the day, like all we ever saw him do, and he never did anything criminal, and he was never arrested, and he was kicked out with like a other than honorable discharge. At the end of the day, all he ever did was go to a gun range every once in a while and shoot. I think they bugged up his rifle because he was keeping it off base. I think they actually got a warrant to put a microphone in his rifle. They definitely had a tracking device put into the handguard of his rifle. And for what? It was a guy that was actually following the orders, which was if they told him stay in your room and don't come out, he would have done it. I mean, he was like an E3. He was nobody.
Right.
So that's what they do.
Talk about the insanity. I touched on this with Bill Taylor, but the insanity of what we've seen with the Gretchen Whitmer Fednapping case. I mean, that seems to kind of sum up, really. It's kind of is a good summary of what we've been talking about the last couple of minutes.
Sure. I think Gretchen Whitmer and the so-called Fednapping, or the federal sort of entrapment scenario where you send 14 guys in to get 10 targets. So you've got more FBI personnel either recruited or W-2 than you have actual subjects of your investigation. I think that's like the most poignant example for people on the conservative right side of things of something that's been going on for a long time. And it's a 9/11 legacy. And so I'm going to give you my theory on this, which I've adopted from a couple other people. My buddy was in the NSA, became an FBI supervisor. He says that on September 12th of 2001, the United States community, like all the USIC, the United States intelligence community, and the law enforcement more broadly accepted a new definition of national security. And it went from, we're going to protect the United States Constitution and we're going to secure the American people's right to live free of force and fraud, and live under this protective document, to no American gets to die from terrorism on U.S. soil, because we just had thousands of people killed in a wide-scale attack that was very well publicized. And so once you accept that no American can die from terrorism, this is a tyrannical mandate, and the only eventual route is, it's tyranny, but it doesn't get there immediately. So what we did is we said, okay, we're going to go find the bad guys. And who were they? They were foreign based, right? So we thought they were in Afghanistan. Maybe they had some sort of roots in Iraq. Maybe they were in Yemen, whatever. So we go after Al-Qaeda. We go after the Taliban, all this kind of thing. So you put the American intelligence apparatus and you faced outward like a guard tower, and you went after and pursued foreign threats to the United States. And we did that internally under the guise of what's called ITOS, or International Terrorist Operations Section at the FBI, where they looked for bad guys who are foreign-based with foreign ideology. So that's really critical. And that lasted for, 6, 8 years, something like that. And they went and found everybody they could. And then also the United States military did a fantastic job of tying those guys up overseas, engaging them kinetically, going after the root causes, distracting them where they were, right? We fight them there, so we don't have to fight them here. And that worked really well. And to the point where the FBI was actually doing these entrapment operations on Muslims in Orange County. People should just do a quick Google search and read the broad sketch of Operation Flex, where they took a guy who was not a Muslim, who wasn't actually Arabic or of Arabian descent. They sent him into mosques in Orange County, California, and tried to get him to radicalize Muslim men towards like radical Islam in order to generate cases, because we're looking so badly for international terrorism.
This is insane. Yeah.
And by the way, that made it all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court basically ruled that the FBI's national defense and sort of national security priorities actually outruled your individual liberties, which is terrifying. That happened very recently, last couple of years. So Operation Flex is a great example of where we failed. Move on. Now what they do is they go, well, we've run out of all the international terrorists. So Chris, we need a new target. We're going to call them HVEs. And those are homegrown violent extremists.
Right. People
that are in the intel community are familiar with it, but the specific definition is local U.S. people. So green card, legal resident, here on a travel visa, student visa, whatever, but they have a foreign ideology. So they have a right to be in the United States. They have an authorized purpose. Maybe they're a second generation Somali or something, but they're associated with Al-Shabaab. They're supposed to, they're working with Al-Qaeda. They're working with ISIS, whatever. So U.S.-based foreign ideology. And they ran out of those guys too, a couple years. And so then somewhere in the Obama era, probably second term Obama, we started getting the move towards this thing called DVEs. So we've gone international terrorism, homegrown violent extremists. Now we've gone into the scariest thing, which is domestic violent extremism. And that's just because you're a sump pump and you're looking for water. So what am I going to pump through? I'm going to find domestic terrorists. And that means anybody that has an ideology that looks dangerous to us. And I think that came from taking the guard tower and looking outward. Right. Looking inward, and now you're like, well, we're already looking here, so we might as well find some of these other guys. So you go find white supremacists, and you find environmental extremists, and you find what they called the J6ers, anti-government, anti-authority violent extremists. Right. So there's all these little cool labels that fall into government where you're using not criminal investigations, threat investigations under intelligence to go find people. And that's when they start drumming up these cases where it's like, okay, do you have a really bad idea online? Are you kind of a dimwit? Can I go ahead and talk you into having a friend that you always wanted who agrees with all your stupidest ideas, can help you do it for the amount of money that you actually have, and can I get you on a material support of terrorism charge? And that's what we saw in the Whitmer case. What we led up to was a bunch of first it was like dumb black and brown people. If you listen to this guy, Trevor Aronson, he talks about the thing called the Terror Factory. And he thought it was all about the FBI's racist attitude towards black and brown people. It's like, no, that's just who they were looking for at that time. They're happy to find anybody that's dumb. And so if you find somebody,
it's always the lowest hanging fruit.
Yeah, it's they always say this in law enforcement. We only catch the dumb ones. And so if that's the case, we find people that have the worst ideas online that have no ability to carry them out. And they could be people who have psychiatric disorders. They could be people that are mentally disabled, and that is very common, and you'll find them all the time. They'll be autistic. They'll be literally diagnosed as mentally retarded. They'll be paranoid schizophrenics, and the FBI will befriend them, introduce first what is called a CHS, or confidential human informant. That person will go and butter them up. Then you introduce a UCE, that's an undercover employee. And the undercover employee gets them on record doing the thing that they need them to do. And then it's flashbangs at your feet. And now you're facing a 20-year federal prison charge. And you're going to, they don't have any money. So they're all going to go to prison.
And along the way, not only have you recruited them, but you've trained them, equipped them,
Yeah, no, they couldn't do anything. They
Giving
couldn't do
them
anything on their own. They
all
can't
the
build a bomb.
logistics.
They don't know the logistics of the attack.
Right.
So it's like, should we do some reconnaissance? And they're like, oh yeah, we should do reconnaissance. What would that look like? Let's go drive by the boathouse. We should drive by the boathouse. You know, it's like they're sticking the ideas into their head, and all the government has to prove, because that does sound like entrapment to normal people. All that proves to people is we have to make sure that the person originally felt like that was their idea, and then you also have to give them an out. But the problem with this tactic, when you find people who are down and out, they have no friends, they have no money, they have no prospects, they don't want to disappoint that undercover who's their only friend in the world.
Right.
So it's like, hey man, we don't have to go do this. We don't have to blow up fill in the blank building. And the guy's like, no, we do. I don't want to let you down because you're the FBI employee that I didn't know is trying to make a case.
You have all this money and you keep buying me toys, right?
That's right. That's exactly it.
The way that you've explained this and the way that you've kind of filled in blanks for people, I think is incredibly valuable. But to do what you've done, I think also it takes a personal toll, right? You did what you did, pointing out these sorts of abuses and the crazy thinking and the crazy behavior, the unlawful behavior. Mm-hmm. But being a whistleblower and laying all the cards out there and being having the guts to stand up, it takes a toll. It's not free of any of consequences or of damage, of retaliation, of stuff that you had to go through. So I think it's important to give perspective. What was the cost to you to have the guts to do what you did?
It was pretty significant. I think people are kind of used to seeing things like on a 1 to 10 scale on these TikTok reviews. So I'll give it, being a whistleblower is like 1 out of 10. Do not recommend for anybody. Very not fun, not an enjoyable path in any way, shape, or form. The basics of it were I went forward to Congress in October of 2021, and by the second week of November, my boss told me, like, you're a whistleblower, right? And it's like, whoa, how did you know about that? Because I didn't tell anybody, and I was really tight-lipped about it.
Right.
By November 23rd of 2021, I was told I could no longer come back into the office because I needed to test for COVID 3 to 4 times a week. I needed to wear a mask and socially distance from all the people out there. And this was in a time when everybody knew that everybody was getting COVID, and my boss's wife, who had been quote unquote vaccinated, was at home with COVID. And so, like, we all knew it was stupid, and he knew it was stupid, and he told me it was stupid.
Right.
They kicked me out of the office. I literally got allowed to come back in after Biden changed the rules. And so I got to have isolation in my own job. From March 4th of 2022 until I was removed in the middle of April, I sat for 6 weeks at a desk by myself in the corner. When I say that they put me in the corner, I literally sat in the corner by myself with no work for 6 straight weeks, waiting for something bad to happen. So that's pretty anxious, to the point where I drove into my office one day, and it was a Monday morning. I've told the story a couple times, but it'll be amusing to people. At 40-something years old, I got out of the car, looked down, and there was a brown spot in the front of my Dodge Durango that I was driving for work, and I realized that I had been incontinent, and I lost control of my bowels because the anxiety was so high driving into work every day. And then I looked down, I'm like, I have to go change my pants. I'm not going to start my day off with a load in my underwear. So I called my boss from the parking lot of my office and said, I'm going home. I'm not starting my work week this way. And he goes, are you okay? And I go, no, I'm not. I'm not okay. I'm not okay. The end. I'm going home. Yeah. So I went home for 2 days, and I came back and I gave it another shot. And a couple weeks later, they ended up removing me. We ended up having to sell our home, which was a beautiful home on 2 acres in the middle of nowhere in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And I had mountains in the background. I had a $5 million view for, a tenth of the price. And my kids lost all their friends that were living there because we had a great neighborhood of cool young kids and families. And a lot of people worked in government or, public service. We had firefighters and cops and stuff around us. And so we lost that. We had to sell the house. We ended up moving into 2 bedrooms that my parents had in their 3-bedroom house in Payson, Arizona. And I took my family of 5 with a pregnant wife that nobody knew was pregnant. And we, moved into their extra 2 bedrooms, and we lived in about 400 square feet, which, by the way, I was grateful to have it. It could have been way worse. But my wife and I were trying to figure out what to do. And then I gave my first public interview, which basically changed the trajectory. And I watched my wife cry herself to sleep for 6 months in a row while she was pregnant, while she had no idea what to do, with no health insurance, with no income, and trying to figure out what comes next, because my government agency, which theoretically protects whistleblowers, kicked us out on the street, and all the people that signed up to protect the Constitution and theoretically care about civil liberties told me, I agree with what you're doing. I think you're probably right, but I've got a mortgage, I've got an alimony, and I'm able to retire in 2 years, so you're on your own. And that's what that's a real moment where you're out in the cold on your own, looking around trying to figure out what to do. And then they blackballed me.
That is the deal, and I think that folks really need to contemplate that and appreciate that, because it's an enormous amount of pressure on you. It harms, or at least puts in jeopardy, everything that you care about, right? The work stuff, for the large part, look, work is work. You can always kind of deal with people or situations. But when you see the impact on your family, that's something completely different.
No, it's atrocious. And all my kids, I'll tell you this too, Chris, we moved to Texas in April, and we did it out of savings. This was April of 2023. So we didn't know what was going on. I was like talking into a microphone a couple of days a week, trying to make my message heard so that people didn't come. I was afraid the FBI was going to kick my door down. Right. And for the first year of this, after we got kicked out of the office and onward wherever we went, I woke up at 5:45 every single morning without fail. I couldn't not wake up at that time. If I woke up at 4 a.m. to, because I had to take a bathroom break, I couldn't get back to sleep because I was waiting for the FBI to kick our door down.
Right.
And that's the agency that I used to work for. So that if they'll do it to me, and I had that feeling, I found out afterwards that they actually grand jury subpoenaed all my emails, everything I had on social media, which I started after my time with the FBI. And they were looking to pursue a criminal case against me because I hurt their feelings. So all of that it's an unbelievable amount of weight that you put on. And I physically put on probably 25 pounds. I've been a lifelong athlete. So I got chubbier, which I wasn't real excited about. My blood pressure was probably not great. I went to bed with a headache almost every night. And so you're worrying about your kids, your family, and so on, to the point where we moved to Texas. And this is probably April of 23. We sit down at the dinner table. We're grateful to have this house that we rented. We're grateful to have some space that we could be on our own so that we could have a baby, because we had another one on the way. And my daughter, who was 5 at the time, she's 8 now, she holds hands. We say a grace over meal. Right. And she says at the end of it, Lord, protect our family and thank you for this food and keep us safe from our enemies. As a 5-year-old. And so my wife and I give kind of the side eye look, like, okay, and you don't want to embarrass your daughter who's 5, who's saying something that.
But out of the mouth of babes, right?
And I look over at her and I go, honey, that's beautiful. Who are our enemies? And she said, the government. And I went like, oh my God, like, what is she hearing? Just the mom dad conversations that are going on over her head. Yeah. She absorbed it to the point where my 6-year-old the other day said, why does the government do things that we don't like? And why does the FBI, dangerous to you, or something to that effect? It's like, all my kids are going to be scarred by this forever. Hopefully they'll become good libertarian types that want accountability. Yeah. You conclude her prayer with amen, right? That's right. So, I mean, in 2017, 2018, I would probably 2 to 3 nights a week be on Lou Dobbs and would advocate for the dissolution of the FBI, that an investigative division of the U.S. Marshal Service be created, and that the FBI be folded in on itself and collapsed in, and good guys could lateral over. There could be some vetting and screening, but the entity itself really should go away. It's beyond repair. It's beyond reform, in my opinion. Kash Patel used to say that. He was going to turn the building into a museum. Obviously, that didn't take place. And now there's a lot of rah-rah stuff. And you said, the Make-A-Wish the Make-A-Wish example of Kash. You're not going to be able to unhear that one. Yeah, running around, in various weird promo shots. So I guess 2 things. Number one, what's the way forward? I mean, there's the idealistic, the aspirational, how should this play itself out? And then there's sort of the ugly reality part of that. I mean, so if you and I, we got a magic wand and ding, we could hit the FBI and make it all better, or make it go away, or change it. What's the aspirational conclusion for how this works out? And what's the very unfortunate reality way? What are the 2 tracks? Yeah, so I would have agreed with you in 2017, and I was a new FBI agent on probation at that point in time. And I agreed from the first week I was there. I was like, I'd shut this place down. Like, I hope the real job is not the same as the academy. They lie to you right out of the gate. So, Chris, the first thing they tell you is that the FBI was founded in 1908. But the FBI was founded in 1935 by an act of Congress. It used to be called the Bureau of Investigation. And when you change names, you get to be something new. The Air Force did it as well. It used to be the Army Air Corps. And in 1947, it became the United States Air Force. Go look up the birthday of the Air Force. It's 1947, right? It's not whenever the inception of the Army Signal Corps that became the Army Air Corps. Right. So all of that was disingenuous. And two of my buddies and I were sitting there. I was like, they'll lie about their birthday. Like, what other things are they lying about? And then you go back and find out that before the birthday.
It's all hinged on the Lindbergh kidnapping, which
right. And the big crazy thing about all of this is the FBI is like all about the myth of the FBI and the prestige of the FBI, which they'll never stop reminding you of. They're the most prestigious law enforcement agency. It's like, I've worked with elite people. I worked at the Air Force with people who are legitimately elite and have been given the highest awards in this country. For military service, and they don't ever have to tell you that they're a stud. They just are studs.
Right.
So it's really funny when someone tells you that you're part of the elite or the prestigious.
They start believing their own press releases. That's the problem.
They have for a long time, and a lot of what here's the best question. Like, I'm an investigative type mind. I was a paramedic before I went into the FBI, so I ask questions to try to figure out what the symptoms are. And I remember someone telling me, like, it's the best job in the world. And you sat there and I received that, and I'm 35 and my classmates are 25. And so maybe it is the best job in the world. But here's someone who's in their 40s or their early 50s saying, it's the best job in the world, Kyle. And I go, oh, what other jobs have you had? And they're like, yeah, I was an FBI intelligence analyst, and then I became an FBI agent.
Right.
And I'm like, well, you don't seem to have like a big frame of reference here. Like, it's the best job in the FBI to be an FBI agent, no doubt. But it's not the best job in the world. Like, the best job in the world I was a finance analyst for Warner Brothers. I worked on the movie lot and got to eat like a king. And I sat next to John Stamos when I would go and have my salad. Like, it was awesome. I rode a motorcycle to work and I had no responsibility. That was the best job in the world to me. So, it's all about a matter of perspective. The danger is the FBI believes its own hype. It's had crimes and sins in every single decade, and most of them are against the Bill of Rights. They did the Palmer raids, and those were widely considered unconstitutional. Yep. They did the Red Scare stuff, and so under McCarthy, they were doing a bunch of things. They were going after commies, and they were going after people that, like, we don't like. But at the end of the day, the American Constitution says you can't go after people for political ideology, and they have the ability to have free speech. The FBI shouldn't be doing it. They screwed up during the civil rights movement as well. They screwed up during the Pat Con time during the 90s. You got COINTELPRO. Like, there are
Whitey Bulger,
sins.
all kinds of problems.
So corruption is part of the game, and they were a blackmail organization, in addition to doing legitimate law enforcement. So let's break the question that you have back down to the origins of the FBI. When the FBI was really giving its big, push to be what it is, an armed federal law enforcement agency that handled interstate crimes, you have to look at the threat landscape that exists. We had law enforcement agencies that did not have intercommunication. We had hard jurisdictions between sheriff's departments. We had hard jurisdictions at state line boundaries. Yep. We didn't have mutual aid agreements. We didn't have what's called NIMS, the National Incident Management Service. We didn't have the NCIC service where you could throw warrants around between different states and the federal government. So none of the stuff that exists, the interconnectivity, existed. So having an overarching agency that could run from Louisiana to Texas to Oklahoma to Kansas to chase down bank robbers and interstate criminals makes sense. Even though the Texas Rangers were better at it, it made sense to have a big agency that would be able to go do that sort of thing. So that's where your FBI investigative thing makes sense. And they evolved into being complex criminal investigations and what they call TOC, the transnational organized crime. That's your mafias and your MS-13s, all that. So all that stuff is great. Do we have those same problems of 1935, of 1945? And the answer is no. We have mutual aid. We have all the things I just laid out that have made that less necessary. So then you have to justify the $11 billion budget of the FBI that is, widely speaking, at least half of it goes towards intelligence operations, and only, maybe a third to slightly more goes into actual criminal law enforcement, which is what Americans think they're getting. And so I would, magic wand fixed, I got a couple of options for it. I'm fine with your Marshals idea, make it investigative, put it underneath, the Marshal Service, move it out, fine. Give it a rebrand. You don't go into a store that has sold you a product that has killed you and you don't go back there and hope for the best. Like, you just don't want it anymore. Right. And there's a lot of missteps from the Bureau for a long time. So, rebrand, lateral transfers, that's all fine. That would make sense. That's not going to happen politically. I think we know that. Nobody wants to give up the ring of power.
Not going to happen. I know.
It's not. The other option that I floated out is a really radical move. And if you want to just, like Kyle's magical idea, what I said is, what if you took that $11 billion and you disperse it on a state by state basis? I'm like, At core, I'm an anti-federalist and sort of a libertarian. So what if you dispersed it to the states on a population representation basis, and you gave all that money to be able to fund senior law enforcement officers and let those guys who are state police officers or people that want to apply from big local police departments or even small ones with a certain amount of experience, they got to have 8 years, 4 of which have to be investigative, something like that.
Right.
You take those people and you cross-deputize them under Title 18 and Title 21, which, by the way, we already do for federal task forces.
We already do that. Yep.
And then you have this really
Texas
powerful
Rangers
entity
that are I know have dual.
So what you can do with that entity is you allow those people to follow the deadly force policies of a local chief, or you let them follow, more importantly, like probably the attorney general of that state. So now they fall under a state entity that has the ability to bring cases to a United States attorney, but also could bring them to a local DA because they're still state peace officers. So you have a double power there. You have all the experience of being a cop and being like a real police officer, which is what people think FBI agents do, even though they don't.
And I think the other thing that's important is that most criminal statutes are at the state level.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
100%.
So, I mean, even the proportion of laws that you're supposedly investigating, enforcing, et cetera, they're state level crimes. They're not everything is a federal production. And that's again part of the weird kind of flip that's occurred where suddenly, it doesn't really count unless it's a federal indictment. No.
Yeah, no, it's absurd. Look, what protects people from force and fraud at the local level? It's going to be homicide. That's a state level charge.
Right.
Robberies, rape, sexual assaults, kidnapping, unless it leaves the state boundaries. Most FBI doesn't even want to touch kidnapping because it's almost always parental. So they don't even want to get into that. We do a law enforcement assist there because we have resources or tools. But at the end of the day, the things that actually affect you in your community are local police officers enforcing local regulations or state level laws, which are the biggest threats to your individual personal sovereignty. And the federal government is supposed to handle the big, fraud cases and white collar or public corruption.
But it's completely blown out of proportion. And so I agree with you. I mean, it's a state issue 9 times out of 10 anyway.
Yeah. So what's really going to happen is not that. They're not going to do any of our radical ideas. Let's talk about a realistic thing. Is right now, let's imagine an hourglass. And at the top of the hourglass, you've got a few little grains of sand. And those people are the folks that raised their hand and said, I want to be a manager and I want to run in a system like the FBI. And so that's going to be your GS-15s and your senior executive service. So top of the federal regular pay scale, that's usually an assistant special agent in charge, or it's going to be a unit chief level at headquarters. And above that, it's going to be your section chiefs and your special agents in charge, your assistant directors, all these kind of titles that don't mean anything to regular people. And that is what people broadly thinking refer to as the deep state, more accurately, the administrative state. And those people are entrenched. Most of them have less than 6 years of investigative experience. Almost exclusively, that's true. They've moved into management at about 6 years in the FBI. And what you need to do to be able to save this agency, and by the way, I told this to Kash Patel multiple times personally, you need to flip that hourglass and you need to find your best GS-13, what we call brick agents. That's the so-called rank and file. The brick agents that do investigations, that want to be close to the mission. I want a guy that's got 18 or 22 years of investigative time that doesn't want to be a supervisor. I want that guy to be a supervisor. I want him to come in and manage the program because he knows what the program needs. I want the first level supervisor that's been doing a desk job and managing the caseload of like a dozen agents for 6 or 8 years that wants to stay close to the work and doesn't want to go to headquarters and promote. I want that guy to tell us how we handle business and running field offices. So you need your 13s and your 14s to really tell the Bureau, this is what the mission is. This is what the warfighter needs, is the same thing that Pete Hegseth is saying. What are we trying to accomplish for the American people? Forget about the bureaucratic rot. And the only way you do that is you get rid of all the SES, move them all to like Puerto Rico. By the way, we wrote this all up in a plan, me and the other FBI whistleblowers. But it's like send them all to Puerto Rico, send them all to Guam. I hear it's lovely this time of year. Make them in charge of federal crimes that happen at their domicile and have them report back once a day so they can get their paycheck until they retire. Because none of them want to do that. Yeah, they're all gonna go to GE. They're all gonna go to Raytheon. They're all gonna go to big, Intel / information military industrial complex providers and do security. So they're all gonna retire. They're not gonna move out to Guam. And then you're left with people that want to do the mission, that tried to stay close to the actual mission of the FBI. And you're going to ask for what I would call reluctant leadership. Anybody who's been in the military knows the guy who wants to promote is probably not the guy you want in charge of you. The guy that sort of is like the salty NCO that just gets moved into position and he knows what's right and tells everybody what happens. That's the guy you want leading. And so let's make that the thing. That's the way you would fix this. It's within the purview and the power of the FBI director today. He could do it right now. And you should also probably have some outside consultants like whistleblowers and retired guys like Bill. There's other guys like Kurt Suzdak and some others that have gotten together that said, hey, we got a real problem in culture in this FBI. And they don't have to agree politically. What they should agree is that the FBI should not be political. And it shouldn't be going after John Bolton. And it shouldn't be going after Roger Stone. It sure as hell shouldn't be going after, like, it shouldn't go into the door of Barack Obama or Donald Trump. We don't need to be a banana republic. We need to have people that understand that, there's bad guys out there. And then there's like red meat for the base. And the FBI shouldn't be pursuing it.
Part of your solution, of course, and this is another great thing for big organizations, part of your solution punishes competency.
Well, that's standard. Like, the Peter principle is something we all talk about in government.
Do you actually know what you're doing? Or then we have to destroy you. Come on.
We have a problem with that. I had a boss, and he's a neat guy, and he still talks to me. He actually left the FBI before retirement, and he's prior HRT, so hostage rescue team, so physical stud, about a decade there. He was a Ranger Battalion officer, and he was a West Pointer. So he's got the pedigree of like what you think. Like he looks like he should be, like a shaved bullet haircut.
He's got a central casting. Yeah.
He's got a big beard and like long hair, and he's physically fit, and he looks like a tactical Jesus, and he's a super interesting guy, and he's very, very aggressively Christian and soft-spoken and smart and all the things that you kind of hope. And he told me, and it was like my biggest compliment I ever got in the FBI. He said, "You were my most difficult employee that I've ever had in the military or in civilian life or whatever." And I go, "Oh, okay. Well,
thank you.
Thanks, boss." And he goes, seriously, he's like, "You see all the problems, you see all the challenges, and you're trying to solve all of them, and you bring me multiple solutions with recommendations of what I should do. And all I got to do is unleash you on it, and you're going to go do it. But what I know is you're going to basically bite off things that aren't even part of our purview because you're trying to fix the problem." And that's like a no-no in federal government. Like, nobody wants to fix the problems. I used to actually have one of those demotivator posters on my government computer on the screen. This is the kind of employee I was. And it said consultants, right? If you're not going to be part of the solution, there's a lot of money to be made in continuing the problem.
That's right.
That's all right. Of Washington, D.C. Like, you don't want to be the solution.
I was a second lieutenant standing in a quad of a complex in Germany, and I was talking to our battalion XO, and so I was the S2, who's the XO, I work for him. And there was some issue that came up, and I said to him, "Well, look, I'm just telling you the truth." And he turned and looked at me and said, "That's going to get you in a lot of trouble, young man."
You'll learn. Yeah, I had fun moments. They made me a team leader at one point. And this is one of the other fun things I pushed back with my boss. He made me a team leader in my surveillance squad. And so I go, "Look, I don't want to be a team." He calls me up. He goes, "I got an opportunity for you." I go, "What is it?" He goes, "I want you to be one of the team leaders for one of our two teams." And I was like, that's a burden. That's not an opportunity. And he's like, no, I'm giving you an opportunity to be like a leader and whatever. I go, "No, you're asking me, and I'm the most junior guy in this team because no one else wants that job." I was like, Let's be really clear. I'm going to do it. You've asked me, and I'm going to step into the role. But you're not giving me an opportunity. I'm doing you a favor, not vice versa. And I want you to make me a promise. When you find someone more senior who's qualified to do the job properly, like, have them come in and do it and take the job away from me immediately. So having that mindset of like, if there's a better person, I want that person to do the job because I care about the mission. That is very different. And you don't get those kind of people to raise their hand. Like, anybody who's been in the military or in government service knows the person who raises their hand is making a poor decision at the very least, right? Like, you don't volunteer for anything. So you can reluctantly be a good leader, but you should usually identify who those people are that are trying to do the mission and then ask them to take on more responsibility. And they'll do it because it's the right thing. And we don't have that currently as the culture of the FBI. We have people that say, "Hey, how about me? I've been in this organization for 3 years. I'm ready to tell people what to do." My boss spent 3 years on cases and then came to me as the same age. And she had 13 years in the Bureau. And so I'm brand new, but we're the same age. We have the same amount of life experience, except I've got kids and I'm married, and I've got a whole different sort of thing. I've managed people before. And she comes in and she's like, "We're so similar." And I was like, "You're a single lady who lives in a townhouse in Alexandria. There's nothing similar to us." Yeah, you have 2 years of case experience.
The life story is very different.
That's right. And anyway, that's who runs the Bureau right now. So that's what we're doing. That's the uphill battle of that culture that we fight.
So speaking of Bureau culture, we now have 2 co-deputy directors, whatever that means. That is not a vote of confidence in my estimation. So Kash Patel is our FBI director, and he's been, Senate confirmed, and he's supposed to be there for the next 9.5 years or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But now we have Dan Bongino, who evidently is having a hard time. I'm glad he stopped doing interviews, because the last interview he did on Fox I found more disturbing than encouraging. And now they've just taken this Attorney General, I believe it's out of Missouri, is that correct?
Yeah, Andrew Bailey.
Andrew Bailey, and said he's a co-deputy director, which no one's ever heard of before.
That's right.
So this is not a positive sign, in my view. What's your estimation?
Well, people just have to ask themselves, have you ever been in a job where someone hired a person to do the same job as you and felt like that was an indication that you were doing a great job? The answer is almost always going to be no.
Yeah.
You don't bring on a co-manager because you need to have, we had a guy, and historically, the deputy director job is atrocious, and I don't blame Dan for not liking it. And, I had a personal relationship with Dan, and I don't anymore. I don't blame him for not liking that job because I've been told it's a 14 to 18 hour a day job. It's nonstop stress. It sounds atrocious. It takes a certain type of person that's going to step into it. And whether you like it or not, the guys like Andy McCabe, who I think did a terrible job, and the one before that, was, or most recently was Paul Abate, and he weaponized our FBI. And the guy before that was David Bowditch was in the mix as well, and he's off at Disney now. By all accounts, was a good dude, but he left on a Friday afternoon with no notice. It's a rough job, and we've always had one. And we actually do have a co-deputy director sort of built into the org chart. So the org chart goes director, that's Patel. And then below that, you have a guy named Dan Bongino, who's theoretically the number 2. But you kind of have this 2.5 position called the associate deputy director. And historically what happened is the FBI was divided into either 6 or 7 branches. And the deputy director would handle 4 of them that were operational. So that's your criminal and your national security stuff. And then the administrative things like science and technology and the laboratory division and NCIC and NTALK.
Admin and logistics.
All the admin stuff goes out there. Yeah, whoever's going to deal with IT, like that all falls underneath the associate deputy. The associate deputy right now is the most senior FBI agent because he's the only one that's a sworn gun and badge carrier. And his name is William Rivers. And he came out of like a small field office. So now he's the most powerful FBI agent. And you got 2 guys that don't have institutional knowledge. So they're bringing in a co-deputy, and the co-deputy also doesn't have it.
Right.
So you got Andrew Bailey, and this is where some analysis is worth looking at. And I'm going to make a speculation here that will upset people, but it doesn't really matter. I think Dan Bongino's gone because Dan Bongino told us on Fox that he's miserable and that his wife is, not happy and he's working long hours and he doesn't like that. And running a podcast is way better than being deputy director of the FBI 10 days out of 10. So he's going to want to go back to that if he can, and I think he will. I think they're looking for a soft exit. I think he also gave Donald Trump an ultimatum, from what we hear. He said it's either Pam Bondi or me. That's probably not a good move. Probably don't do a stare down.
It's not a good idea to give the president ultimatum. It's just
when you're the number 2 at a sub-cabinet agency, right? That just doesn't play very well. So I think that probably sealed it, but they wanted a soft exit because the optics would be bad. So they brought in this guy, Andrew Bailey. And so now we have to look at who Andrew Bailey is. And I think he's been doing a bang-up job in Missouri, and the people in Missouri tell me he's great.
Yes, yeah. Yep.
So he's got good cases. He picked up where Eric Schmidt left off on the Missouri v. Biden case, which now has a different name. He's sued China over COVID. He's sued Planned Parenthood or stepped in there to try to do some things that are very pro-life. And so by all accounts, he's doing the job that you want a conservative AG to do. And his predecessor went into the Senate. So that's a national springboard. He could have gone into Congress. He could be a governor, or he could go into this, another federal office at a high level. He's going to go be the number 2 at the FBI, which is a sub-cabinet level position. That doesn't make any sense to me. And so I think this is a soft squeeze out. And I actually think there's even more evidence, which if you'll bear with me, I'll tell you.
Sure.
But what happens is I think Dan Bongino leaves. I think maybe 60 days. I've been told he's already packed up his office and he's on his way out. So different sources, but left-wing media outlets ask me if I heard the same thing. People inside the Bureau have told me that. That leads me to believe it's probably likely. That's the kind of word on the street. So that's fine. I don't begrudge him going home. I think that's probably best for him and for the country. I think Bailey's going to step in there and realize that he also is not the right guy, but I don't think he ever was. And he's too smart and he's too savvy of a politician who's been successful at, state level office. AG is one step below, stepping into a governor's office and has very high notoriety, particularly with conservatives. I think he was going to step into the FBI director spot. And I think Kash Patel is going to eventually leave because there's been some real missteps, including the Make-A-Wish stuff. The other reason that I think that is because Andrew Bailey was the number 1 choice for the Trump administration in January. And I got phone calls from Kash Patel's PR people. And I got phone calls from folks that wanted to see Patel in saying, how do we push Andrew Bailey out? And, they did some Oppo research on him, and I've heard some of those things. None of those actually are going to stop him from being a great candidate, but they were doing a concerted push to make sure Bailey didn't get named and that Kash did. And I don't think you get asked, because he obviously was interviewed about it. I don't think you show up at Mar-a-Lago, get asked about being the FBI number 1 to come in and be the number 2 later, a couple months later, and leave that very high level position as an AG in the state of Missouri. Wow. So that's my kind of take on it.
Yeah.
And after I said that out loud, which maybe Kash Patel didn't realize that, after I said it out loud, Patel started making some really illogical moves. One, they went into John Bolton's house, and that seems very forced and desperate. And the second thing is, yesterday he announced 10 whistleblowers have been reinstated into the FBI with full back pay, security clearances, and all rights and privileges. But here's the problem. I know almost all of the FBI whistleblowers that are currently looking for a job out there right now, and I certainly know all the high-profile ones that anybody would recognize.
Right.
None of them have a deal. So Kash announced something as a PR win, and then didn't have the paperwork on the back end signed. And we actually know that the DOJ was only authorized to do certain things. Then some out of nowhere, Kash Patel puts that out, and an hour later, those attorneys are getting phone calls from FBI's liaison, a guy named Marshall Yates, who's out on vacation. He gets called in from vacation to start making phone calls to make these deals, because now you got 10 slots you got to fill, and they got to figure out who they're going to put in there to make this win. So this is a desperate attempt on PR. I think he actually realized he's on the squeeze right now. So that's kind of the inside baseball that I like to play in.
That is quite a story, and everything rings true.
I mean, that's the thing. It's
which is
all
one of the things
logical.
where you may not necessarily have all the pieces, but they kind of line up just right. So we'll see how it plays out. But I think what you're saying, is sort of like, you see the headlines. Okay, that's great, but okay, well, what's behind that? Why is it playing out this way? And you've filled in a lot of the blank spaces.
I'll give you one
there.
more little blank that's also worth noting, and this is the funniest thing, because I've had people call me and say, hey, since when are you calling the shots at the FBI? And I go, as far as I know, never. I have never been. I was a brick agent in Las Cruces. Nobody knew it was in America.
Little did you know.
Yeah. So I put out a tweet on Twitter, which is where a lot of this, for better or for worse, we have a very PR-driven Trump administration 2.0, and they spend a lot of time looking at that, and that's where they get their sort of they're polling in many ways in real time. And I put out a post on August the 4th, and I highlighted that the guy who was flying Kash Patel's plane, the pilot of the Gulfstream 550,
I saw that. Yep.
was actually the case agent on the classified documents case and was working on behalf of Jack Smith. And so I had people in the FBI tell me that, and then I went and tried to substantiate it. And it's like, well, yeah, he was one of the guys that was part of the subpoena service of Harrison Floyd, who ended up being a defendant down in Fulton County. And he was working with Walter Gardena, who was one of the guys that put cuffs on Peter Navarro. Navarro's actually gotten kind of a bug in his bonnet to go after that guy, which is pretty amusing to see as well. And then the people that were part of it all got wrapped up as well. And then I've been calling out another guy who was a domestic terrorism supervisor, a guy named Steve Jensen, who took over Washington Field. So I name all these people in my post and what they're all about. And I've been putting pressure on them because I don't want bad actors in the FBI. That's the end of the day. And what I think it did is it actually proved the point that I've been making, which is that you don't have institutional knowledge. You don't even know who you're promoting. You promoted the case agent that was investigating the president to go fly you around on a plane. And some of the time he's hanging out in the back with you on crew rest because they don't fly nonstop.
Right.
So now he's part of your private little circle of friends in the FBI. And my understanding is that lit a real fire. I may or may not have called somebody inside the Trump administration who has Donald Trump's ear as well, told them that I was going to do that before I put it out. And I think it had a very strong impact. So I've had people call me up and say, you got, scalps hanging off your belt. CBS reported it 2 days ago. Seraphin got calls from people saying there's scalps hanging off your belt. And I didn't mean to get them fired. What I wanted them to do is not be in position of authority.
Right.
And, go live in Guam or go live in Puerto Rico and stop being part of a political atmosphere. You certainly can't be the guy who investigated Donald Trump and then fly around Kash Patel, the FBI director. Like the optics are just ridiculous.
So speaking of ridiculous optics, you have James Comey, praising Taylor Swift. I guess he was talking in code. What the hell was that? Besides one of the most effeminate things I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, Jim Comey is an interesting character. He's certainly not a super masculine guy, even though he's about 11 and a half feet tall. I used to refer to him as a middle finger to the American people when he started coming out and we realized what he was. I mean, I knew he was full of crap when I was actually at the academy. My dad sat through one of his speeches at my graduation from the FBI Academy, and they were like, man, he's really a good speaker. And I go, yeah, that's about the fourth time I've heard that exact same speech with the same, laugh lines and pause breaks and clap breaks and all that. He's very talented and he's very charismatic if you are a medium midwit IQ sort of consumer and you've never seen him before. He comes off as genuine and sincere and passionate and patriotic and all those things. And then you see him dressed like an action figure out of the Kamala Harris, sort of campaign where he's wearing the Biden-Harris stuff and he's sitting there with the coffee mug and the baseball hat and the socks and the T-shirt and the shorts and the underwear. And you're going like, oh, that guy's like a partisan actor. He was very well regarded within the FBI, and the people that he promoted are still running the FBI, just like the people who Chris Wray promoted are still running the FBI. Right. So that management culture still exists. I don't know what's going on with that guy, but I think he mostly probably escaped the statute of limitations, finding a broader conspiracy. They made an announcement that he leaked classified material. The problem is that Obama in 2009 updated who was responsible for classified material. And as long as that material originated inside the FBI, he's an original classifier and declassifier. So he has final say on that. He could be overruled, I guess. But if he made a decision, it doesn't go to somebody else to check. So he can leak classified stuff and get away with it and spin narratives and so on. So he was a real interesting actor to watch in. And like I say, the middle finger thing is, I got a picture where Comey's standing in the middle, and then it's me and my dad, who are 5'8", and then my mom and my wife, who are like, 5'4" and 5 foot. And then you got Comey, and he's like 9 feet tall in middle of us. And I swear to God, it looks like a middle finger just poking out of it. It's very, very funny. He looks like he's from another planet. And some of the stuff that he goes out there and says, I don't know who he thinks, like, who is the audience that consumes I'm a Swiftie at whatever the heck age he is as a grown man? That's so strange.
That's why I thought he was doing impersonal communication. He was an emergency contact plan.
He was deploying some sort of coded talk and activating.
He was blinking SOS, or I'm not sure, but it was very, very strange. Very
super strange.
Kyle, listen, you've got a tremendous podcast that you do daily. You obviously have a very active, I was going to say Twitter, but I guess it's X account. Yeah. But as we wrap up here, please tell folks how they can follow you and your work, and I'll give you the last word.
I appreciate it. They can follow me at Kyle Seraphin. That's on X. That's on YouTube if you're a YouTube type. If you want to go to Rumble, the free speech one, it's rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. If you want to find us on Spotify, it's KyleSeraphinShow.com. So we keep it pretty straightforward. The final word is, I just want Americans to know what their $11 billion pays for in the FBI. And if you don't understand that you're paying for an intelligence agency and you expect a law enforcement agency, your expectations are not going to be realized. So as you go forward, especially people that are interested in, Judicial Watch and transparency, you got to know what you're looking at first. And, don't be afraid to be a critical thinker and put down pom-poms, even though you want your team or your guys to win. Don't be afraid to say, hey, are we getting what we asked for? Is this really the right way to go about it? And are these actually serving my core principles, which hopefully are things like American liberty and fairness and, a Bill of Rights that actually means something for everybody in this country. And that's my thing.
Kyle, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time. And also, what I appreciate most in our conversation is the honesty. You say what you mean and you mean what you say. And that's very rare nowadays. And we really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. I had fun.
I'm Chris Farrell, on Watch.